The morning coffee routine, a sacred ritual for many, had become a source of mounting frustration for me. A remote software engineer whose home office, in the seemingly idyllic Willowbrook Heights, was now ground zero for a baffling series of package thefts. The realization hit with the icy grip of a Texas norther. Another delivery, crucial replacement parts for my work setup, had vanished from my porch. This was the fourth disappearance in 2 weeks, and my patience, already worn thin by the neighborhood's overzealous homeowners association, was about to snap. Rushing outside in my slippers, I found only the eerie quiet of a suburban morning, the thief a phantom. Then a jolt of memory, the new doorbell camera, installed after a spate of local break-ins. With trembling fingers, I pulled up the footage on my phone, my coffee mug nearly slipping from my grasp. The culprit wasn't some shadowy stranger, but Robert Mitchell, the husband of our HOA president, Karen Mitchell. The video was damningly clear. Robert, bold as brass, strolling up to my porch, casually examining the package label with the detached curiosity of someone perusing a newspaper, then snatching the box and whistling a jaunty tune as he sauntered away. The audacity was breathtaking. To understand how we arrived at this suburban telenovela, we need to rewind a few weeks. Karen Mitchell, HOA president for 3 years, had transformed Willowbrook Heights into her personal fiefdom. This woman didn't just enforce rules. She breathed them, her control bordering on the obsessive. She patrolled the streets, clipboard and ruler in hand, measuring grass heights, photographing garbage cans 3 inches too close to the curb, and lamenting mailboxes that were, in her expert opinion, the wrong shade of black. Her latest fixation, announced with a smug smile at a community center meeting that reeked of old coffee and collective disappointment, was package decorum. Packages left on porches for more than 4 hours? Unsightly. $25 fine. Delivery trucks momentarily blocking driveways? Formal warning. All, she insisted, waving printouts of cherry-picked real estate statistics, was absolutely necessary to maintain our property values and neighborhood aesthetics. And always, lurking in the background like a silent, calculating shadow, was her husband, Robert. While Karen commanded the spotlight, Robert would stand by her side, a mute pillar of nodding agreement. Most of us barely registered his presence. Looking back, his unervingly focused stare as Karen detailed her new package policies should have been a blaring red alert. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was to reinforce Karen's decrees. The quiet ones, I was learning, could be the most menacing. The missing packages quickly escalated from an annoyance to a serious impediment to my life. First, a book for a critical work presentation vanished. Then, my replacement phone charger. The breaking point was the disappearance of my mother's custom photo album, a labor of love filled with irreplaceable family memories, the day before I was scheduled to visit her. Casual, low-key inquiries around the neighborhood unearthed a disturbing pattern. Mrs. Peterson, 2 streets over, whispered of 3 lost packages, including vital prescription medications. The young couple next door, new homeowners, had resorted to having all valuable items shipped to their workplaces, a massive inconvenience. Yet, whenever this growing epidemic of porch piracy was raised at HOA meetings, Karen would dismiss the concerns with a flick of her perfectly manicured hand, insisting that residents who diligently followed proper package protocols, i.e., stayed home all day, wouldn't have such issues. The irony, given what I now knew, was sickening. The Tuesday, I was expecting a replacement laptop charger for a crucial next-day presentation. The tracking showed delivery at 2:15 p.m. At 2:35 p.m., my porch was bare. This time, the doorbell camera footage was even more brazen. Robert Mitchell, 2:17 p.m., scooping up my package, examining the label with proprietary interest, then tucking it under his arm and strolling off as if collecting his own mail. The sheer, unadulterated nerve was astounding. I saved the footage, then began a meticulous review of previous recordings, unearthing clear evidence of at least 6 other thefts by Robert over the past month. The next morning, I staged a stakeout. Positioned by my front window, I waited. Around 10:30 a.m., Robert appeared, his eyes methodically scanning the neighborhood porches like a predator surveying his hunting ground. As the mail truck delivered a package to my neighbor's house and drove off, Robert made his move. I stepped outside just as his hand reached for the box. Our eyes locked for a heart-stopping moment. Neither of us moved. Then, as calmly as I could muster, I said, "Robert, I've been wondering where all the missing packages in the neighborhood have been going." His response remains, to this day, a monument to audacious self-justification. He didn't deny it. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't even attempt to return the package he was about to pilfer. Instead, he shrugged, a gesture of utter indifference, and stated that it was his wife's rules. Packages left unattended were community violations, so he was simply handling the problem. The man genuinely believed he was performing a neighborhood service by systematically stealing our deliveries. That afternoon, armed with hours of security footage clearly showing Robert Mitchell engaged in a methodical campaign of package theft throughout Willowbrook Heights, I filed a formal police report. The officer who took my statement, a veteran cop with seen-it-all eyes, seemed genuinely shocked by the sheer volume and clarity of the evidence I had compiled. Within days, the police had interviewed several other neighbors, many of whom had their own security footage, corroborating Robert's actions. The pattern was undeniable, a clear modus operandi. Target houses during known delivery windows, take whatever was left unattended. As word of the investigation spread, a dam of fear and frustration broke. More residents came forward, emboldened by the fact that someone was finally taking action. Karen Mitchell's reaction was predictably apoplectic. She appeared at my door the following evening, practically vibrating with rage, her usual composure shattered. How dare I accuse her family of such ridiculous allegations? Her husband, she insisted, was a pillar of the community, and these accusations were clearly retaliation for her strict, but fair, enforcement of HOA regulations necessary for maintaining their precious property values. I listened to her tirade for about 5 minutes, then calmly turned my tablet around and showed her the highlight reel. Robert, her pillar of the community, casually stealing package after package, whistling as he went. For the first time since I had known her, Karen Mitchell was utterly, completely speechless. Her face cycled through a fascinating spectrum of colors, from indignant crimson to a sickly, pale green. The police, armed with an avalanche of evidence from multiple households, moved with commendable speed. On a quiet Thursday morning, as the neighborhood began its day, 2 patrol cars, engines barely audible, pulled up to the Mitchells' immaculate home. The one with the perfectly polished brass knocker and the meticulously changed seasonal wreath. I watched from my front window, coffee cup in hand, as officers approached the door. Karen answered, dressed in her usual power suit, likely expecting to intimidate some minor official with her HOA authority. Her confidence evaporated instantly when the officers asked for Robert and calmly explained they had a warrant for his arrest on multiple felony theft charges. The color drained from her face as the reality of the situation, the irrefutable video evidence, the testimony of her neighbors, the cold, hard hand of the law, finally seemed to penetrate her bubble of self-delusion. Robert emerged from the house, looking resigned, almost defeated, as if he'd been anticipating this moment for weeks. He was still in his pajamas and slippers, clearly caught off guard despite his apparent resignation. The officers read him his Miranda rights in clear, professional voices, while Karen, now standing aghast in her doorway, oscillated between shouting about harassment, demanding to speak to their superiors, and loudly proclaiming her husband's innocence. Her voice, usually a finely tuned instrument of HOA control, now carried across the entire neighborhood, drawing the very attention she so desperately tried to manage. Neighbors, some still in bathrobes, coffee mugs in hand, had quietly gathered on their porches and driveways, watching in stunned silence as the man who had been systematically stealing from them was led away in handcuffs. The irony was lost on no one. The couple who had spent years lecturing everyone about proper behavior and neighborhood aesthetics was now providing Willowbrook Heights with its most dramatic and, frankly, most satisfying spectacle in recent memory. The aftermath was swift and decisive. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following week. Karen, ever defiant, attempted to maintain control, insisting the charges against her husband were baseless, a misunderstanding orchestrated by disgruntled residents, and that the neighborhood should rally behind their proven leadership. Instead, she faced a room filled with the simmering resentment of residents who had been systematically victimized by her family's brazen scheme. The vote to remove her from the HOA board was a landslide, 37-2, with only Karen and one remaining loyal sycophant voting in her favor. She stood at the podium, face flushed with a humiliation so profound it was almost pitiable, as the community she had ruled with an iron fist, the community she had sought to mold in her own image, unequivocally rejected her. Robert Mitchell was ultimately charged with multiple counts of theft and trespassing. The prosecutor, armed with the overwhelming video evidence and victim testimonies, laid out a compelling case. Stealing mail and packages, the judge emphasized, is a serious federal offense, especially when conducted with such systematic, premeditated intent. Robert's ludicrous defense, that he was merely enforcing his wife's package decorum rules, crumbled under the weight of his own recorded actions. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay over $4,000 in restitution to the victims. When the judge read the sentence, Karen, observing from the gallery, let out a strangled gasp, the full, devastating consequences of her husband's and her own entitled arrogance finally crashing down upon her. Her rules had landed her husband in federal prison. Willowbrook Heights, free from the Mitchells' reign of petty tyranny and organized theft, began to breathe again. The stolen packages were a tangible loss, but the theft of peace of mind, the erosion of neighborly trust, had been far more damaging. With Karen gone, a new HOA board was elected, one focused on actual community improvement rather than a bizarre obsession with package decorum and the color of mailboxes. And I, the remote software engineer who just wanted his deliveries, could finally enjoy my morning coffee without wondering if a shadowy figure was about to make off with my much-needed laptop charger, all under the ludicrous guise of upholding neighborhood aesthetics. The doorbell camera, once a necessity, became a simple convenience again.